Good afternoon. This is Michael Wong. I'm the Vice President of the San Francisco chapter of Veterans for Peace, and I'm also a member of the National Board of Directors of Veterans for Peace. Today, we're very honored to have Dee Knight on our channel. He's going to talk about his new book, which just came out, and it's called Befriending China, and we'll have a further discussion of it. Dee Knight is a member of the advisory board of the Friends of Socialist China, and he also serves on the China East Asia subcommittee of the International Committee of the Democratic Socialists of America. He was a publishing consultant for United Nations Development Program from 1991 to 1996, and he was also a publishing consultant for the Sandinistas newspaper, Barracuda, from 1987 to 1990. He also was a draft resister to the Vietnam War in Canada during the war and was on the Amex publishers. He has a long history of resistance to U.S. Foreign wars, as well as publishing different articles and books. Dee Knight, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you. And I can tell you with appreciation that your audience, or should I say, all of your audiences are among the most important potential audience for my book. I've at least one of my, I think both of my books include Veterans for Peace in the dedication. I'm happy to report that my earlier book, still a 2025 edition of A Realistic Path to Peace, has just won an award. I actually have a trophy behind me that I received last night, so it's a little bit on my mind. Befriending China is so new. I can only look forward to positive developments, but I think it has a real chance. It's a labor of love that's based on three recent visits to China, the most recent one invited by the sponsors of a special in Global Insight, China Insight forum that took place in Southwest China in the province of Guizhou. But I'll tell you more about that as you ask me questions.
Yes, and actually, I'm very interested to hear more about your trips to China because one of the things that I've observed on my numerous trips to China is that even the first time you go to China, even if you just go there for a 2 week vacation, on a normal tourist tour from, any travel agency that does tours in China, it breaks a whole lot of the stereotypes that we hear in the mainstream media about how China is, very backward and authoritarian, and the people there don't know what's really going on in the world. In my experience, it's a very modern, sophisticated culture. The people there are very open. They know a whole lot about the world. They know more that the average Chinese that I have met in China knows much more about America than the average American knows about China. Most Americans know almost nothing about today's China the way it really is, whereas most Chinese have a fairly accurate picture of what America is like. If anything, their picture of America is probably actually a little better than the reality of America if you actually live here. But tell me what your experience was in your trips to China.
It was very similar to what you have just described, with some variations that had to do with the various places that I went to. I have visited Shanghai and Beijing and Suzhou and Hangzhou, all famous East Coast cities in China, as well as the capital of Guizhou, Guiyang, and the southwest interior, and perhaps most dramatically from the point of view of surprises, Xinjiang, where I visited both the capital, Urumqi, as well as the ancient Silk Road city of Kashgar, also known in Chinese as Kashi. And on our first trip to China, which was a delegation dedicated to the concept that China is not our enemy, it was one of my primary goals to visit Xinjiang because 2 years ago, when it was in November of 2023, um, it was still very common in U.S. media and even an official government commentary to hear Xinjiang denounced as a center of slavery, uh, uh, even genocide, which kind of faded as the U.S. government sponsorship of genocide against Palestine took place, and it became very common to hear that the the claim of genocide was downgraded to nothing but cultural genocide because uh, uh, the Uyghur language was an elective in the public schools in Xinjiang, whereas the Mandarin language was required. It's a little bit though like public schools here, where everybody has to always learn English. Whether it's their first language or not. And there are only a handful of public schools that provide bilingual education or offer actual uh, uh, official courses, for example, in Spanish or Chinese, when there are very large numbers of both those populations in many of our cities, certainly in San Francisco and New York and Los Angeles and Chicago, just to mention a few. So, to your point, the biggest surprise of all was the amazingly positive and harmonious lifestyle of people living in Xinjiang. And we made a point to visit the harvest areas, since we were visiting there at the height of the cotton harvest. Cotton is one of the very big products in Xinjiang. Xinjiang produces about 25% of the cotton produced in China, which is a major global cotton producer. And as some people know, um, right wingers in Congress managed to pass a bill making it difficult for American clothing producers and marketers to sell cotton-based products from China. But what we saw was the cotton was being harvested by the same kind of mechanical combine harvesters that are used here in the U.S. I grew up in farm country in Oregon, and I worked in the wheat fields, and the combine harvesters were very common there. And these harvesters in Xinjiang look exactly the same and are the dominant way that cotton is harvested. There are some crews, there are cleanup crews of contract laborers who go in to cut the cotton from the edges of the field that the combine harvester can't meet. So that was a significant change. I also enjoyed visiting Beijing during early summer in June. Still very hot there. And one of my favorite little pastimes was an evening walk in the evening on a hot summer night. I'd walk in through a street fair, go to a vendor and get an ice cream cone, maybe a croissant, and watch the street dancing that was going on. Several different street dancing activities. I think two were very informal and one was more choreographed. The thing that I enjoyed was just to see that street dancing was a very common activity, both for older people like myself, as well as uh, family age people. The same was also true in Xinjiang, but with a difference. The Uyghur culture is very, very special and quite different from what many people think of as uh, Muslim culture based on the Wahhabi or Sunni sects. The Uyghur Muslims are Sufis, which is far more meditative, but also quite merry. So the dancers are dressed up in very colorful costumes, and the dancing is very friendly, and they invite guests to participate. And that was very enjoyable to see. Um, the other uh, observation I would make from both Shanghai and Beijing is how quiet the streets are. You know, the thing is that about half the vehicles on both cities' streets are electric. And so the traffic noise is much less. And even though there are still quite a number of bicycles and scooters, they're electric too. So uh, uh, even though the streets tend to be dense with traffic, the noise level is very low. Another nice thing I wanted to speak of from Beijing uh, is related to today. Today is May 4th, and we visited the May 4th Museum at Peking University. The May 4th movement was a precursor to both the general revolutionary movement and specifically to the Communist Party of China. And it started um, on May 4th, I believe it was 1919, no, not, sorry, 1917, in the wake of the Versailles Conference, where uh, the European and North American delegations who dominated the conference basically let the Shandong Peninsula remain a colony of Imperial Japan, which infuriated the young Chinese intellectuals who formed the May 4th movement as a forum of protest. And I'm happy to say that I'm helping to organize another delegation to China right now, and I'll make sure that delegation participants get to see the Museum of the May 4th movement at Peking University. Really worth the visit. Sorry, I keep going on. I'll let you interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, that's fine. Yes, and actually, I appreciate your stories. When I was in Tibet, I noticed that, a lot of the propaganda that you hear about Tibet was also false, just like what you said about Xinjiang. When I was in Tibet, what I was told was that in the schools, from kindergarten on through high school, the primary language of instruction is Tibetan, but people are required to take one class each semester on Mandarin so that by the time they graduate from high school, although their primary language is Tibetan, they are sufficiently fluent in Mandarin that they could function anywhere in the country that they wanted to go, because as Tibetans, they are also Chinese citizens, which means they have the full rights of any Chinese citizen, which means that they have the right to work and live and travel and do anything anywhere in China that they want, the same as any other Chinese citizen. But of course, on a practical level, in order to do that, you need to be able to speak and read and write the language, which, they, by the time they graduate from high school, they are at least basically functional in both languages. Um,
Right.
and when I was in Tibet, I went into the temples, I saw the monks practicing their meditation, their chanting, their traditional practices. We saw people on the streets, bowing, taking a few steps, bowing. We saw actually Tibetan culture not only being practiced in Tibet, but influencing the Han Chinese in China in general. We saw like hundreds of Chinese visitors, Han Chinese tourists coming and visiting the temples and bowing to the Buddhas, putting money in the donation boxes, that sort of thing. And also, I'm
Absolutely.
talking to Chinese from different parts of China that in all of the major cities in China, there's a certain, subculture of interest in Tibetan Buddhism. And there's actually
Absolutely.
Tibetan monks who have left Tibet and are, teaching schools of Tibetan Buddhism in different cities in China. That's actually quite common. Uh,
Yes, I certainly found that to be true. I was actually surprised when I was told that about 15% of the Chinese population nationally are practicing Buddhists. And it's interesting to note that Tibetan Buddhism is the most influential strain or strand of Buddhism throughout China. We visited, uh, and it's featured in the book, the hanging temple in the near Datong. It's called the Xuankong Hanging Temple. I don't know if people can see this picture of it. You'll have to get the book. I can tell you that it was an amazing experience to me, um, to actually climb up the side of the cliff that temple is built on, which is you have to, it's 3,000 feet up, and it's a walk with, climbing upstairs. I'm old enough that one of my knees is affected with arthritis, and it was a bit much, but I did get up to the top. And we also visited literally dozens of uh, Buddhist statues in Datong in northern Shanxi province, which is just to the west of Beijing. And it is another, what you might call, hotbed of Chinese Buddhism. Of course, we also visited several different Buddhist temples right in Beijing, which was astonishing and somewhat overwhelming to me, just because of the enormous size of these Buddhist statues, but also because of the reverence of a significant percentage of the local Chinese visitors to these museums. They were not casual. They were bowing reverently and kowtowing in some cases, uh, burning incense and kneeling and praying in front of the Buddha, typically for 10 or 15 minutes at a time. And people were lining up. Uh, I was raised Catholic and stopped being religiously active many years ago. And, I'm uh, uh, a lefty, so I don't think too much about religion, but I was very impressed across China at um, the fact that people are very open about practicing their religion. That was true not only of Buddhists, but also of Muslims, which, of course, should not be a surprise, but is a surprise uh, for American people going there. China has millions more Muslim believers than the United States does. And as I say, when visiting both the capital of Xinjiang and Kashgar, we were able to observe the religious practice. We went into the largest Muslim mosque in Kashgar, which is a beautiful place. It has benefited from government support for refurbishing it, making sure that it's suitable for what is a large-scale practice. The local population attends prayers almost daily there, and we're talking about between 2,000 and 5,000 faithful, depending on the day. So that's a little bit of a surprise. Um, but, I got to tell you, China is full of surprises. One of the other things about Tibet, you probably know, but your listeners may not know, the high speed trains that China has become famous for are making it to Tibet as we speak. And this is really amazing because, Tibet ranges in altitude from 10,000 to 20,000 feet above sea level, and the air is thin. The temperature is generally always cold. Much of the land is frozen or frosty, which poses tremendous challenges uh, for building railroads of any kind, and especially high-speed rail. But it's complicated also by the fact that there's a significant amount of tunneling necessary to make it possible for those trains to get through. But it is very, very much part of the Chinese commitment to make all of China economically integrated. And needless to say, I made it my business to travel on the high-speed rail when I could. Literally, it was mainly between the East Coast cities, from Shanghai to Beijing, and then Beijing to Hangzhou, and Hangzhou to Suzhou. But it was well worth it, and it's really impressive. It really goes to show what you can do if you have government planning and a much lower percentage of investment involved in military and much more involved in infrastructure. The other big deal is the commitment to common prosperity, to making the entire population really part of the economic rise. During the first 50 years after the revolution triumphed in 1949, the unevenness of economic of economic welfare was very noticeable. Very divisions between East and West, between city and country, and so on. Now, as I think people know, China succeeded by 2020 in bringing all 800 million of people who had previously suffered extreme poverty to a level much closer to what could be considered middle income, with good housing, electricity, running water, internet connectivity, access to either productive farming or manufacturing work. The progress that China has made in economic terms is very, very noticeable. I was especially impressed by one of my hosts in Guizhou, which is one of the provinces that had been still held back by the difficulties of its infrastructure. It's a very mountainous province that, because of these mountains, there were some places, especially among the national minorities, where people had been essentially held back in the centuries of poverty that had been their reality for generations. My host, who worked in the uh, provincial foreign affairs department told me that one of her volunteer activities was to help the local uh, minority population develop marketing for their very, very beautiful handcrafts. And it essentially made uh, uh, their villages economically viable, which had a very concrete benefit. Many of the men in those areas, which are relatively short distance from the factory city of Guangzhou and the new industrial and electronic city of Shenzhen, close to Hong Kong, these men had basically had to leave their family and go there to work in these factories and only come home for national holidays. That's changed now as a result of the targeted poverty alleviation program. So that was a very big deal for me, and something that makes me a believer. You know, I'm a socialist, and my attitude is that we should be able to have industrial development where the workers themselves benefit. And that's one of the things that you really see in China. Years ago, let's say 40 and 50 years ago, the scuttlebutt was that China was able to get the investment from the West because the wages were dirt cheap. And that was true. But, you know, wages have increased by 10% a year for the last 4 decades. Now you do the math on that. It means they've doubled and doubled and doubled again, you know. And if you include the social wage, free education, free health care, virtually free housing, the standard of living for the average working class Chinese person is actually very close to par with Western working class. They're not upper middle class, surely not. There are some rich people, of course, in China, but the average person is doing very, very well, much better than before. And that's a very big deal.
That's a good point. I'd like to shift to talking about the environment because we only have 10 minutes left before our Zoom link might cut out. Uh, and I know China has been making a very great commitment to becoming carbon neutral. They have the largest fleet of electric vehicles. They have electric buses. They have electric cars. Their trains. You know, they've got solar panels. They're reforesting parts of the desert by, you know, hundreds of acres. They've just done a lot in the last decade or so, even
That's
toward
right.
becoming carbon neutral. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, one of the most dramatic ways to talk about it is to reflect on walking in the streets of Beijing. You know, a longtime friend of mine told me she didn't want to think about China because uh, uh, its industrialization has endangered the planet. Well, and it used to be that people in Beijing walked around with masks because of pollution. That's no longer the case. And it really is a result of a concerted effort over the last 2 decades, especially to emphasize green development. In fact, the rate of economic growth has slowed down as the official policy is to emphasize green and quality development. So that, for example, uh, uh, there is at least one major coal mine in uh, sorry, can't remember the name of the province, just to the west of Shanghai, where what used to be uh, a coal mine is now uh, uh, a green agriculture center, and they're using aquaculture. And in the intensive coal mining country of northern Shanxi province, they have done major investments in what they call clean coal, which is just one side of another flip in energy development, which has included making China the leader in solar panel development, wind turbines, and now something very new that is being built in Gansu and other desert provinces, where they actually have uh, essentially built very, very high towers that are equipped with solar generation that allows them to take advantage of the closeness to the sun to generate enormous quantities of solar energy and transport it through the grid, which of course is fully developed there. And it is having the impact of making the government commitment to energy neutrality come down to essentially by 2030 they'll be free of fossil fuel energy and able to exist on the combination of solar and wind and hydro, as well as nuclear energy. China is doing amazing things. And your point about reversing desertification is also very, very relevant. It's worth noting that a higher percentage of China's land is desert than is true, for example, in the United States. Once you get west of Kunming or Chengdu, you're in a very, very large desert that stretches for hundreds of miles into the eastern stretches of Xinjiang. Xinjiang, of course, is the largest, geographically largest province, and I forget the percentage, but a substantial percentage of the land area of China. And all through there, but especially in Guangzhou on the edge of the desert, they have innovated desert grass as well as tree planting that is changing a significant percentage of the desert. And interestingly, China is now able to share this de-desertification as part of its development cooperation with countries in Africa, which is another significant thing. Just very briefly, as I know we're running out of time, I want to say that on my most recent trip in November, I was part of a delegation that was largely made up of foreign visitors from countries that are partnering with China in the Belt and Road Initiative. One of my favorite traveling companions was from Kyrgyzstan, just across the border from Xinjiang, and a very significant direct beneficiary of the Belt and Road Initiative, with China cooperating in the development of both rail and highway infrastructure there, as well as the follow-on development activity. You know, once you develop the roads and the railroads, what follows are factories and cities, and that has helped China with its successful effort to dramatically reduce and alleviate poverty inside the country. And it's doing the same thing with partner countries, especially in the near border, but also in the countries of Africa. It's really easy to befriend China. I want to say, as we near the possible end, that for me, befriending China rhymes with defending China. And the point of my book is that it makes much more sense for both ordinary Americans as well as for the US government to find ways to be friends with China and not be enemies. By the way, it's worth noting that it's a healthier option because, one of the things that uh, uh, President Trump is discovering is that the trade war with China is not likely to go well at all because China's economy is significantly stronger and more resilient than our economy. They don't have unemployment or homelessness there the way we do here. And uh, the China is a net exporter not only of manufactured products but also of money, unlike the United States, which is in very deep debt and has deep troubles. China's economy is very, very healthy, and they're able to share that health across the world. And there's a message from China to the United States that we should bear in mind. China is ready to share that wealth with the United States on a peaceful, mutually respectful basis. And I, for one, think that's the way to go. One of the really sad things to note is that the right-wing politicians in Washington are trying to terrorize Chinese students to leave the United States. Meanwhile, the Chinese government is actively encouraging American students to come to China and take advantage of scholarships to go to university in China. It makes me wish that I was in my 20s or 30s because I would do it. And, I think that we should consider encouraging our children and grandchildren to consider Chinese universities as a realistic option. And in my book, you can find out about study opportunities, which also, by the way, can be found in RedNote, the successor to the TikTok social media. I now use RedNote because it's part of my research. And it's possible for anybody that has a computer or a telephone, that is to say, a smartphone, to get on RedNote, where you can get your first initial classes in the Chinese language. You can also find out about university opportunities in dozens of Chinese cities. You can take your pick between the major cities of Shanghai and Beijing, or colorful cities like Chongqing, for example, which is in south central China, or any of many other universities, Wuhan. I taught English over the internet to Chinese students. So I met students from Wuhan. They have very good universities there. And of course, it's an opportunity to see the amazing success that China had with overcoming the coronavirus. So look at me. I'm going on and on. Forgive me.
I know. I think we're almost out of time, but I did want to plug your book one more time. I know it's available on Amazon. But where else can they get it? Can they buy it directly from the publisher or from you? In addition to Amazon, where else can people go to find this book?
You can go to my Patreon site, which is called Dee Knight's Books, Notes, and Chats, and find a whole variety of ways to get the book. Another good thing to do is approach your local library and ask for it there. Recently, I've found expressions of interest in the book from about 100 libraries across the country, and I think that number is likely to double. So interested people can go to their local library or to their favorite local bookstore and ask for the book. It will be available even if it is not on the shelves, and that's important to know. The book is distributed by the major national book distributor, Ingram Content Group, as well as being available on Amazon. And the major library distributor is making it available to libraries across the country. Of course, the book is also available as an audio book, and people can search for Amplify, where the book is readily available for download directly to your smartphone, or you can go to uh, uh, Audible on Amazon, or Apple Books, or Spotify, or a whole number of other audiobook media. And by the way, if you buy the audiobook for $10 from Amplify, I personally will send you free a digital version, an ebook, which you can then use together with the audiobook if you want to. So that's a little bonus and an incentive. The audiobook just costs $10, whereas the paperback costs $15. But the main thing I want you to know is that the book is available to you no matter how you want to get it. For those who would like to get a free review, you can go to NetGalley. If you sign up as a reviewer, you will immediately have access for free to the book in ebook form or in audio form. So that's a little bit. Oh, by the way, you can also go to my blog, dknight.blog, and there you'll get access not only to that book, but also to A Realistic Path to Peace, as well as my personal political memoir, My Whirlwind Lives, which, you know, is especially relevant to people of our generation, since it tells about the things that I was doing 50 years ago, which can be good gossip material and can fill in the blanks as to how it is that my mind was so thoroughly changed. You know, I started out in the early 60s as a supporter of Barry Goldwater, who was what you might call a spiritual father to Ronald Reagan and a precursor to Donald Trump. And I, you know, voted in a straw poll for him in my senior year in high school in 1964. I've come a long way since then, and all of that is documented in My
You
Whirlwind
certainly have,
Life.
and you have a fascinating story. I have that book as well. We'll have to have you back sometime soon because you're a fountain of great information. I think for now we'll probably call that an interview because we're just about out of time.
Well, I thank you very much. It's been a wonderful time to be chatting with you.
The same here. Thanks, Dee, and we'll talk again sometime soon.